Thanks for spending a little bit of time with me today. As a reminder, please feel free to provide any feedback and discuss these ideas on LinkedIn or YouTube or wherever you may find this content. There are no experts here, only practitioners, and I really look forward to hearing from you. Today's topic is the process improvement leader's state of mind. First, this is going to span across 3 episodes because, as I said in the introductory episode, my plan is really to focus less on the nuts and bolts of various improvement tools or statistical methods. These are things you can readily Google, and really spend more time on the human element. And since you are presumably human, there's no better place to start than with you. And honestly, you are the tool that you will use most often in process improvement. So the 3 takeaways for you, the 3 things that we're going to discuss in this block of episodes are episode 2, this one. What are the traits of a successful process improvement leader? Episode 3 will be what is the mentality or the mindset that will make a successful change agent? And then the third piece in episode 4, what behaviors are derailers for a process improvement leader? This isn't a common term that you hear, so really is a bit of an explanation that a derailer is something that takes the train off the track. So it's really kind of a good metaphor. I was really excited to share these thoughts first in this series of videos or podcast or whatever this is going to be, because I believe that before we can talk about project sponsors and stakeholders and methodologies and tools or even statistical tools, we have to start with you. What should you as an individual bring to the table? How should you act as a change leader, and how should you not act as a change leader? What is it about you that will create success or hinder success? And what behaviors will bring you closer to your goal, and what will push you further away from that goal and perhaps out of reach? In this episode, we're going to start with traits, character traits. I've got 16 of them, which is to say that there may be way too many, or that there may be a lot missing. Think of these as conversation starters, perhaps, or think of these as thought starters as you think about hiring or doing performance reviews. The 16 that we're going to cover are change agent, truth seeker, patient, business savvy, data analysis, data savvy, influence, organizer, a prioritizer, culture builder, grit, happy warrior, willing to get dirty, willing to go to Gemba, good listener, and finally the ability to talk from top to bottom of the organization. So at this point here, I've delivered the meat of the episode, and in a minute I'm going to talk about a little bit more of each of those in detail, but honestly I think most of them are pretty self-explanatory. So before I continue, I wanted to talk a little bit about the why. How do you use these? How is this information useful? Naturally, I have a few ideas. First, I think if you are hiring people who need to be change agents, I would use this list of values in your job description and in your interviewing and selection process. Second, you can use these in assessing your current team. Maybe consider each person who is expected to be a change agent and assess how they perform against each of these and incorporate that information into an active development plan. For example, perhaps you have somebody who is reluctant to put on that reflective vest and go to the warehouse or production line and see what's happening. You owe them the feedback that making change is a contact sport, and you need to spend some time on the floor where the value is being created and delivered. So as I dive into a bit of the details of each of these, I encourage you to think as we go how to use these traits to advance your continuous improvement program. And I definitely encourage your feedback on this list, as well as your ideas on how to utilize such a list of traits in your organization. So saying that, let's dive a little deeper into the 16 traits of a successful process improvement leader. Firstly, you are a change agent. Your role is to bring about change. You're a catalyst in the sense of a chemical reaction. A catalyst gets added in the presence of some raw materials, and you cause a chain reaction that makes something change. You have to be a lover of change. Everything that you do is about making change. When you're added to the mix as a catalyst, then change is expected. Next, you are a truth seeker. As you delve into the processes, you are going to be lifting rocks up, looking for bugs and golden nuggets. You have to do this like a scientist who lets the data guide you instead of opinions or self-interest. You can start with a hypothesis, but it's absolutely critical that you are a seeker of truth. If you're an outsider, you may be starting this effort with little to no credibility. And don't blow it by not being truthful. You are finding out information that is likely unknown to the leadership. What is really happening on the floor? Now, why do I call this out? Am I implying that you're going to be dishonest? Of course not. What I am calling out is that you are going to be collecting facts by asking really good questions, and those facts may lead you away from the preconceived notions of you, of your stakeholders, or your project sponsor. Don't come into this situation thinking that you need to parrot back what you've been told, or that you need to only find the facts that support anyone's hypotheses. The whole reason why the organization is investing time and money to dig into these processes is to find out what's going on. So do that. Even if it means the project gets canceled or something unflattering gets discovered, use your sponsor to help you if you're unsure or uncomfortable. Once I was asked to find ways to improve a process at a third-party vendor that my company used to process our customer contracts. The vendor received the physical paper, they scanned and processed it, stored it into a massive fireproof vault system. That was a real feat of engineering. I flew out there and I dove pretty deep into the processes. I mapped the processes out, asked a lot of questions, and drove a lot of clarity. But the big improvements that I was sent there to find simply weren't there. Turns out things ran pretty well. I would have loved to have stayed there and have done some improvement projects, but I didn't find anything that would justify the expense. But our leadership knew a lot more than they did before. They had a better sense for what the vendor did and how they did it, and they can move forward with this information to make better judgments. Next, you're going to need some patience. Just be ready for it. You'll need to be patient for so many reasons. Firstly, you may not get a welcome committee at the airport. You may not get the time, focus, and attention that you need. Resistance is a whole topic in and of itself, but remember that change is hard, and that resistance is based on culture, the individual, and the environment, to include the amount of change that may already be going on. Be patient and be understanding. Also remember that although this project may be at the top of your list, it may be the 17th item on your process owner's list. It may not be on anybody's list. They may not know about the project at all. But remember, as you find these barriers, that you may also be finding some of the root causes of why the process isn't delivering. In military terms, you're conducting a reconnaissance in force, and you're drawing some fire that will tell you a lot. The next trait is business savvy, and I would say it is pretty important. It doesn't mean that you need to have an MBA, but you do need to understand the basics of how an enterprise works. You know, every business must sell a product to a customer, and the ability to sell is a function of our ability to meet a customer's needs. You should understand revenue and what it does for the company, and you should, of course, understand costs, both direct cost and indirect costs. You should be cognizant of that labor cost could very well be the biggest cost of the process. And what about risks? There are safety risks first and foremost. Then you have operational risks and some of the more intangible risks like reputational and regulatory. And the enterprise must be in compliance with national, state, and local laws and regulations. You need to be able to think about these things in a way that an executive and a shareholder would. So be conversant in customer, product, revenue, cost, safety, risk, and compliance. Also, let's talk about data analysis. You should be very comfortable with data analysis. Everything you do ought to be quantifiable. Every process should be quantified. One of the biggest cultural issues that you may run into is the lack of a data-driven mindset. As you drive real, tangible, and effective improvements, it's easy to leave the metrics plan behind. This is a challenge for me, I have to admit. I love to solve problems, and when everyone is on the same page, wanting to solve problems, you drive to solutions and implement them, and you see things actually getting better. But talking about data feels like it kind of gets in the way. After all, the customer doesn't pay for the data, but they pay for you to deliver a process that works. Everyone's excited, things are getting done, and we can see that the process is working qualitatively. But bringing up hey, how do we want to measure this, seems to put the brakes on sometimes. But you need to have data to demonstrate that there is a problem, and you need data so that you can measure your improvements, and you will need data so that you can detect when the process goes sideways again, and it will go sideways again. You need to be comfortable with being the only voice asking for data. Along with being comfortable with data is to be data savvy. This is critical. I would argue that if I had to pick between someone who is good with data analysis and someone who is data savvy, I would take the latter. We have never had more data. According to the German company Statista, we are growing data exponentially. We've gone from 2 zettabytes created, captured, copied, and consumed worldwide in the year 2010 to a forecast of 181 zettabytes in the year 2025. A zettabyte, by the way, is equal to 1 trillion gigabytes. So, as a society, we are simply awash in data. You will increasingly find yourself with data coming at your ears. But you will need to be savvy to know what is useless, what is interesting, and what is critical. In Army intelligence, you learn about the difference between data, information, and intelligence. We learned this when we studied military intelligence and how to collect it and gather it in the Army. So I'll give you an example based on that past. So we think about, here's data. The human head weighs 8 pounds. Okay, that's data. Thank you. Now there are 100 of those heads attached to bad guys, and they are organized and equipped as a rifle infantry company. Okay, that's information. That's informative. Now that company of 100 bad guys is infiltrating northward, and they are planning to attack your base from the south at dawn. Now that's intelligence. Can you see the difference? It's obviously some things are much more critical to know than others. So what's the difference between data analysis and data savviness? Your ability to sift through the trivia, past a lot of stuff that is really interesting, helpful, and distracting, and go right to a critical few key performance indicators or key metrics that will really help you define a root cause or provide a North Star so that you can make a difference in the business process that you're looking at. A big part of leadership is influence, is our next trait. You need to have influence for 2 reasons. One, because it's pretty likely people won't want to do what you want them to do because you ask nicely. And 2, influence is a key driver to gain change acceptance, which is where you persuade people that a change is necessary and that you can get their willingness to suffer in the short term to realize the longer term success. This point's really important. If you don't successfully drive change acceptance, the changes you make will simply not be sustained. And this to me is the second biggest failure mode for projects, is the lack of the sustainment of the change. You need to have the ability to lead, not through issuing orders, but through kind of an exquisite mix of persuasion, setting the right conditions, and maybe even an assortment of carrots and sticks. In terms of the next values, the next trait, I'd say organization is a must. This one may seem to be an odd trait to add, but I think some of the best ways I've found that I've been able to add value is simply organizing the work. Some of the tools that we'll talk about later, like E02 thinking or 5S, deal with organizing. Organizing drives clarity when we are often are missing the clarity that we're often missing when we're facing a problem that we don't understand. In the same vein, another great trait to have is prioritizer. If you can prioritize, you can add a lot of value easily. Once you get an improvement project underway with a decent amount of engagement, then you will have no shortage of opportunities coming at you. If you started working on them all right now, you would probably finish them all in about 3 years, but you don't want to wait 3 years to move the needle on what's really important, so you must prioritize. What improvements will drive the improvements we want? We will talk about project portfolios and prioritization techniques later, but what's important now is to bring a sense of, one, we can't do everything at once. Two, we have a limited window of resources and attention that will become more limited if we don't produce results. And three, we truly value all the improvement ideas and we want to honor them without actually doing them. You admire your kid's drawing, you are thankful for it, and then you put it on the refrigerator door. By the way, here is where that business savvy comes to play, to know what is important or not important. I suspect most of you are in the midst of deploying new ideas and new tools to your organization. In this case, you also need to be a culture builder. You need to be able to change the culture through your actions. Changing culture is very difficult to do, and it takes significant time and effort. But if it needs to be done, it needs to be done up and down and across, and it needs to come from the top and from key influential voices in the organization. Just contemplating a changing culture reminds me of another trait that's so important, grit. You have to find in yourself the ability to persevere and endure. I highly recommend the book written on this topic by Angela Duckworth. In her book, Grit, she lays out some interesting findings, including that grit is far more predictive of success in life than intelligence. If you want to change culture, you will need a lot of grit. Also, I need you to be happy warriors. You're going to be likely doing a metaphorical battle against an ingrained culture that is in desperate need of change, or with intransigent teammates or unsupportive leaders. You may find yourself very, very alone. Along with grit, you will need to find within yourself the ability to enjoy the ride and have fun. Believe me, I've been there. How do you stay happy and positive? Knowing, I think it's really knowing that what you're doing is important to someone important in your organization. And as long as you have their support and you remain positive and keep moving forward, you will succeed. Life is too short to be miserable, so have fun and learn how to laugh at the situation. Don't ever let them get you down. That is often the only way they have to win. Happy warriors must also be brave. Let's talk about what you can't be afraid of. First, you can't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Leadership is often by example, which means physical courage and moral courage. Be willing to tackle the hard jobs yourself and do the heavy lifting. This can mean doing things that are perhaps you don't feel are up to your pay grade. I've seen people above my pay grade in a distribution center picking up the nastiest trash up off the floor because it was important and it sent a message to me and everyone else. We can all tell from this guy's shoes he has no business picking up broken pallet pieces, which also tells us that if he can do it, we all sure as heck can. Sometimes doing the dirty work may be doing manual data collection or writing training manuals. You should not be afraid of digging in. But of course, this is also not meant to be a permanent state of things. Get the ball rolling, flesh out the work, then drive the handoff and long-term ownership so that you're putting yourself to your best use. You also must not be afraid to go to Gemba. Okay, so first I'll acknowledge I'm throwing a new term at you perhaps. Let's talk about Gemba. Lean Six Sigma practitioners are known to throw out random Japanese terms at you, and I apologize in advance, but this one's a good one. It is the name for the place where the work is actually getting done. Maybe it's important to call out what Gemba is not. It is not the break room, it's not in your boss's office, it's not in a conference room, and it certainly isn't in your home office. Gemba is a place where you might be uncomfortable. It might be a place where you need to wear protective gear. It's a place where you may be getting a lot of sideways glances, or you may not even be welcome at all. You may have to get on a plane and leave the country to go to Gemba. Gemba isn't near your kid's school or your gym, and it surely isn't going to only exist during normal working hours. But go you must and go you shall. Why? Because you must engage with the process and the problem with all your senses. Trust me, going where the work is happening is not only invaluable, but it is mandatory. Do not undertake any project lightly if you cannot go to Gemba. Honestly, once you start doing this, it's going to be fun for you. I would say it's the fastest way to grow your expertise in a process. Take a moment and think about where Gemba is in your organization. Where is Gemba in your home? I think for me, it's definitely in the kitchen. The last two traits deal with communication. So thanks for hanging in with me. First, I need you to remember the old saying about how God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. The idea is that you should be doing twice as much listening as talking. Well, God should have given us 5 ears, but because to be a good listener, I want you to aim for a 5-to-1 ratio. Listen and learn. I heard a story about an Army general who visited some of his units, and he showed up and he said nothing. He let the soldiers do all the talking. And because people don't like silence, they fill the void with speech. They end up saying a lot more than they planned. And the general learned an awful lot more than if he would have spent that time talking. This is really the effect that you're going for. Now, I will say that I do want you to ask lots and lots of questions when you're not listening. Do not lecture. And you may find it opportune to take a few minutes to communicate the vision and paint a picture that excites the team. But do this in the right way and at the right time. Finally, since we're talking about talking, you will need to be able to talk to people from the executive ranks to the floor associate. You've likely heard this before, so let me share with you what I think this means. When talking to stakeholders and project champions or sponsors, you're going to speak in business terms. Again, back to business savvy. You're going to be justifying the significant cost of your project. You're going to be providing succinct summaries and crisp communications. You're going to be adding value by moving the project forward in the right direction. But when talking to the team, you're going to be asking questions, but you're going to be showing sincere respect for what they do. Remember that they are taking care of customers day in and day out, while you are not, and are likely being asked to do way too much, and they are taking time away from accomplishing their own goals and objectives to give you time so you can ask questions. They may be out of their comfort zone. If this process is in trouble for enough for someone to send you to come fix it, then they are likely trying to bail out a sinking rowboat with a leaky ladle. So keep that in mind and be empathetic. When talking to associates on the floor or in the field, you're going to need to put them at ease. You will likely stand out like a sore thumb. They may become more worried about their employment when they see you. Their behaviors may have already changed due to your presence. Tell them why you're there in general terms. They don't need to know the project charter. You're going to be super respectful, and you're going to show interest in what they do, and you're going to ask good questions. You may want to build some rapport, but if you do so, please be genuine. For example, if an associate is wearing a Dallas Cowboys t-shirt, don't try to talk about something related to Dallas Cowboys related unless you are knowledgeable and sincere. Don't be, yes, I enjoy the American foosball sports competitions as well. If you want to talk about it, then just be genuine. This kind of move, when well executed, can be helpful, or it can make you look fake and manipulative. So use a lot of caution. People like to talk about themselves, so that is probably a better move. Talk about the work they do, talk about their families, talk about what they think about how things are going. Demonstrate open and non-threatening body language. Thank them for their good work and their good ideas. So with that, I'd say we're ready to wrap up. To summarize, hold on to your hats here. To summarize, I want you to be a truth-seeking change agent who is patient, savvy about business and data. You need to be good at data analysis, influence, organization, prioritization, and culture building. You are a gritty, happy warrior with the willingness to get dirty, go to Gemba, with good listening skills, and who can talk to everyone in the organization. So stay tuned for the next episode in the series when we'll talk about the process improvement mindset. Thank you again for listening and making me a part of your day. Please add to the conversation with LinkedIn, YouTube, or wherever you find this content. And as always, we are always onwards and upwards. Thank you so much.